Today we're going to be talking about the swing states that you should watch for 2020. Yeah, I know we are 888 days away, but I've decided that we should make a video talking about which swing states are probably going to be the most contested. In 2008, you could probably tell the day after the 2008 election which states would be toss-ups. Now, whether or not they were completely accurate is, it will depend when we come to 2020, but we already know states like Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, all the Rust Belt, and the rest of the states that are considered not filled in for each candidate right now are probably going to be toss-ups in 2020. We may actually see a couple more, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So when looking at the map, there are a number of states that are never going to flip. States like Wyoming, South Dakota, Idaho, Utah, Alaska. But there are some states that are considered red on this map that right now this is the competitive map, meaning states that were decided by less than 10% in 2016. There are a number of these states that are probably going to be considered toss-ups in 2020 that are filled in red right now. None of these states are going to be considered none of the blue areas are going to be considered toss-ups in 2020, according to, a number of demographic changes, how people have voted in previous election years, whereas states like Indiana, yes, Vice President Mike Pence is from that state, but we'll talk about it in just a moment. Missouri could become a toss-up. Montana could become a toss-up. Depending on the candidates, Utah could also become a toss-up. And that leaves the Republicans with 96 safe electoral votes. And states that are drawing away from the president could also become toss-ups. In 2008, Montana, North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana were all toss-up states, and that was not expected whatsoever. But in 2020, Trump is probably not going to lose North Dakota. He's probably not going to lose a state like Kentucky or Tennessee, but states like Missouri, Indiana, and Montana are no longer safe in his column. Yes, they may be likely, but that still puts them one step closer towards a Democratic victory. And a number of these states are also likely for either party, like Virginia, likely for the Democrats, or Texas, leaning or likely, depending on who you're talking to, for the Republicans. And, the fact that, keep in mind, states like Iowa voted more Republican than the state of Texas, so that's something to talk about. But when we're talking about states to look for 2020, keep in mind Trump is probably going to draw back his base. Republicans right now aren't so inspired to come out in midterm elections, but when it comes to a presidential election, yes, they'll get their stuff together, as the Democrats did after the Tea Party wave in 2010, and were able to not only hold the Senate, but expand seats. And they did not win back the House, but they did expand their seats, and they did win the presidential election. So it's not completely lost for the Republicans. They will get their stuff back together, but swing states to watch for are all in tan right now. But Trump is probably not going to lose Utah. Even with an Evan McMullin split, he probably would take second place. And Montana's probably not going either. Yes, it could get close, but it's probably not going to a Democrat unless the Democrat is extremely popular and something drastic happens. Going over to Indiana, I think this one could actually get a little bit closer than you might expect. Yes, Vice President Mike Pence is from this state, but that doesn't always mean much. His approval rating as governor wasn't too high. The way people viewed him in that state didn't really make an implication on the Republican primary. Otherwise, Ted Cruz would have won the Indiana primary, and Donald Trump probably would have won that state regardless if he was on the ticket or not. But, Trump will probably hold on to it. Missouri's a state that he's probably going to hold on to, too. He won it by 19 percentage points. However, it drastically made a swing in 2000 compared to 2004 to 2008. Yes, 2004, it was a little bit closer than you might expect for a Republican state like that, but it still came back to being a toss-up state in 2008. So looking at that, Missouri probably should have flipped before Indiana did in 2008, but it didn't, but it did come extremely close. So the next few swing states we're going to be talking about. So Texas, that's pretty much out of the reach for Democrats until 2024. A lot of you have been saying things like Texas is never going to flip. Well, if you ignore the reality, then you're going to get the reality, because you can't do anything to defend against it. You can't try to fix a problem you don't see. If everyone else sees it, then sure, maybe. But if you're single-handedly saying, oh, Texas is never going to flip, and then it flips, then you're royally screwed over. And Texas is a state that's pretty dynamic when it comes to minorities. It's definitely going to have a key minority population when it comes to elections like 2024, 2028, but 2020 is probably not the year. Democrats aren't going to do the best in Texas in 2020. They could bring it down to 4 to 5%, but 2024 is probably the first year it will actually be considered a swing or toss-up state. But Texas right now probably landing in the GOP column. And Virginia is probably going to the Democrats. We really don't see a Trump victory in Virginia, especially after all the elections that recently occurred. And the 2017 governor election was it showed everything. It showed that Democrats are not only holding on to their base, but that their primaries don't really affect their general election, compared to the GOP primary did affect their general election and pretty much split between the Trump, the Trump vote that wasn't so keen on voting for Ed Gillespie, and it wasn't great for the president, nor was it great for Ed Gillespie as well. And then we're going to look at some of these states. So Iowa probably would be a toss-up state. Okay, Ohio is probably going to be a toss-up as well. North Carolina, probably going to be a toss-up. A number of these states have been close for years. Georgia recently getting close, but definitely with minority turnout, it's probably going to be a swing state. Florida as well, being a swing state. By swing states, I mean all of these are probably going to be decided by 1 to 3%. A state I don't see being a swing state that voted for Donald Trump is the state of Michigan. I think the state is probably going to stay with the Democrats. Go to the Democrats, because they were able to perfectly hold on to the state until Donald Trump came around, and Donald Trump's approval rating is letting down so many Republicans in the state of Michigan. A lot of them thought he could possibly win it in 2020, but now hopes are getting very low, especially with that governor's race coming around. The Senate race coming around, which really shows Debbie Stabenow clearly in the lead, clearly going to win that race. It's going to show that the Rust Belt is going against the president. The Wisconsin governor race may be something to watch, but the rest of the Rust Belt is probably going for the Democrats. The governor race is something to watch, but it's probably not going to be as much of a referendum against the president, considering the Senate race does have implications on the president and the governor's race does not. And Michigan voted for Donald Trump by around 11,000 votes. I'm not saying it's safe for the Democrats, but I'm not thinking it's going to be a 1 to 3 percentage point thing. I think it'll be around 5 to possibly 8 percentage points for the Democrats. It won't be any Barack Obama 2008 numbers, but it could see something like in 2012. Pennsylvania will definitely be a toss-up. Colorado and New Mexico, don't see them being toss-ups. These are states that are typically Democratic, and we're probably not going to see Trump expand here anyway, considering his approval ratings. And Wisconsin, definitely going to be a toss-up. Minnesota, I also don't see going to be a toss-up. Minnesota is a probable state that could possibly go to the Republicans if they played all their cards right, but keep in mind, they never do. The Democrats and Republican Party always make mistakes, and sometimes it costs them elections. And key states like Minnesota, they're probably not going to target, compared to a state like Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa. The states in yellow are probably going to be more targeted than a state like Minnesota, which they didn't even carry in a Trump wave year. In Nebraska, second, that one is also going to be a toss-up. We're going to see a lot more attention go there, especially with a hotly contested congressional race. That one's going to be watched very closely by both political parties. And New Hampshire, like every year, is going to be a toss-up, but up in Maine, Trump's approval rating isn't doing so well, especially in the areas that he won. It's not where it needs to be, and the Maine at large is probably not going to Trump, even if he does his best as of right now, because he's already done too much to win back or actually win the Maine at large, but he probably will still hold on to that second district very narrowly. I'm considering the margins he won it by in 2016, but keep in mind this is typical Democratic area. Arizona is probably going to be a toss-up. Just keep that in mind. Arizona is usually a toss-up state, and Nevada will also be a toss-up. Trump's approval rating is pretty high here for a state that Hillary Clinton won, so we could see this one getting competitive. But comparing it to other states, again, the numbers are not really actually that comparable. The president isn't doing so well in states that he won, but he's only doing well in 2 states that Hillary Clinton won, the states of New Hampshire and Nevada. Virginia, Colorado, New Mexico, all out of his reach for 2020. So when we're looking at the map, it's not going to be so easy for a Trump victory, but it also won't be so easy for a Democratic victory. A number of these states are yellow. Yes, they were won by Donald Trump, but it doesn't take much for him to bring his base back. The thing is, though, I think he's lost a number of independent voters that weren't a part of his base. So if he's able to bring them back in states like Iowa and Ohio, he doesn't need independent voters. North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, he doesn't need independent voters. When it comes down to the Rust Belt in states like Florida, New Hampshire, and Nevada, these are states where the independents really matter, and that's where Trump is really either going to shine or fail. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.